والسلام على عباده الذين اصطفى خصوصا على أفضلهم وخاتم النبيين محمد الأمين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين وبعد. We praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as He ought to be praised, and we thank Him this night for the opportunity to be here in Kota Damansara in Kuala Lumpur after 4 years back in Malaysia. And we pray for peace and for blessings on all His noble messengers, and in particular on the last of them all, the Blessed Prophet Muhammad sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam. Our subject is not a difficult one, don't worry with the chairman. Islam and the end of history. I gave this lecture in Penang 4 years ago, and you may have listened to it on something called YouTube. You heard about it? Yeah. And now once again here in Kota Damansara. The lecture is divided into 3 parts. In the first part, we'll try to distinguish between the end of history and the end of the world. End of history, you know, Akhiru Zaman. Akhiru Zaman. An end of the world. In the second part, we will look at Akhiru Zaman in different other religions and ideologies. What is the Buddhist view? What is the Hindu view? What is the Christian view? What is the Jewish view? This will be very interesting for you. Al-Akhiru Zaman. And finally, what is the view of that imposter? That imposter. You know him, you met him. Modern Western civilization. And then finally, what is the Islamic view of the end of history? So this is 3 parts, inshallah. The Quran tells us about history that it is always witnessing conflict between al-haqq and al-batil, truth and falsehood. However, history cannot end without the triumph of truth over falsehood. Before that, when the prophets of Allah came, like in the case of Musa alayhi salam, truth triumphed over falsehood. You remember when falsehood was underneath the water drowning? Fir'aun? Truth triumphed. In the case of Dawood alayhi salam, in the case of Sulaiman alayhi salam, in the case of Nabi Isa alayhi salam, there is some unfinished business. So the story is not finished yet. He's coming back. In the case of Nabi Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam, he actually went into the Kaaba and took a stick, a rod, and he knocked down the idols one by one. And as the idols came crashing to the ground, he recited the ayah, وَقُلْ جَاءَ الْحَقِّ وَزَهَقَ الْبَاطِلِ إِنَّ الْبَاطِلَ كَانَ زَهُوقًا. Truth has come. I hope Singapore is listening. Truth has come. I hope Washington is listening. Truth has come. And falsehood has been vanquished, toppled. I hope London is listening. Falsehood will always be defeated and toppled. when the final moment comes in the historical process, at the end of history, Akhirul Zaman, then truth has to triumph over falsehood for the last time. And that will be the end of history. But that is not the end of the world. No, no, no. We don't know how long the world is going to last after that. Only Allah knows the end of the world. The end of the world is when you will have the destruction of everything and its transformation into something new, and then you'll have the resurrection, al-ba'thu ba'd al-maut. That is the end of the world. So now that we have explained to you, it's quite simple, isn't it? The distinction between the end of history and the end of the world. We can now proceed to the second part of the lecture. Namely, what is the conception of Akhirul Zaman in Buddhism, in Hinduism, and other religions? When I was 29 years of age, I wrote my first book entitled Islam and Buddhism in the Modern World. And we have some copies of that book with us here tonight. The Buddhists rejected the Hindu caste system. The Buddhists rejected the worship of all the gods and goddesses of Hinduism. But Buddhism accepted the Hindu belief in reincarnation, that you die and you're born again. Well, the US dollar is dying now. I don't think it's going to be reborn. It is an intensive care unit now, the US dollar. So we die and we are born again, and die and we are born again. They call it reincarnation. And so they say that history moves in cycles. Cyclic movement of history. You start, you go around, you reach the end, you start again, you go around, you reach the end. Until you achieve something called nirvana. Nirvana, when you achieve it, now you will no longer be reborn. You will now be absorbed into the cosmic life force, because Buddhism doesn't talk about God. In Hinduism they have it a little bit more specific. They call it the big soul, Param Atma, and you are absorbed into that Param Atma, so you're no longer going to be born and reborn and born and reborn. The Hindus, and I believe the Buddhists as well, I'm not too sure, the Hindus for certain are of the view that we are now located at a moment in time when a cycle is coming to an end. So they also have this Akhirul Zaman, but Akhirul Zaman of this cycle. The Christian belief is that God incarnated, took human form, and came and lived on earth in the person of Nabi Isa alayhi salam, Jesus. And so when God lived on earth, that for them was the golden age. They still consider it to be the golden age, even though they believe that he was crucified. He was crucified, and yet the golden age. They believe that history has moved in a linear, straight line, linear direction, but constantly downhill, going down, going down, going down. Until that time comes when Jesus is to come back. And when he comes back, then truth in Christianity, or the Christian claim to truth, would be validated. So they're waiting for Jesus to come back. When he comes back, Jesus is going to be the ruler of the world from Jerusalem. So Jerusalem is the key to the end of history in the Christian view. The Jewish view is that the golden age was when Nabi Dawood and Nabi Sulaiman alayhim salam established the holy state of Israel in the Holy Land. And that holy Israel was the ruling state in the world. And so the Jews ruled the world. And truth in Judaism was triumphant in the world. That was the golden age. The Jews believe that because of their violation of the covenant with Allah, that Allah punished them. They accept that. And so they were exiled from the Holy Land. The Jews believe that Allah has made a promise to them, that He's going to send to them one who will be known as Al-Masih, the Messiah. And when he comes, he will bring back the golden age. And Israel will rule the world one more time. And that golden age would validate the Jewish claim to truth. So history would end with truth in Judaism triumphant in the world. The Christians and the Jews both have the belief that the Messiah will come to Jerusalem, and from Jerusalem he'll rule the world. But in the Christian view, the Messiah is Nabi Isa alayhi salam. In the Jewish view, no, they don't accept that. They reject him. They say about him, وَنَعُوذُ بِاللَّهِ مِنْ هَذَا, he's a bastard. And a bastard cannot be the Messiah. No, because his mother was not married. وَبِكُفْرِهِمْ وَقَوْلِهِمْ عَلَى مَرْيَمَ بُهْتَانًا عَظِيمًا, says Allah in the Quran in Surah An-Nisa, that this was an act of kufr on their part, to hurl this slander at the fair name of Maryam alayhi salam. And they said he could not be the Messiah for a second reason. Oh, we saw him die. He died before our very eyes. He never ruled the world. And so he could not have been the Messiah. And so the Jews are waiting for a Messiah to come. And they know that Allah is not like Washington. When Allah gives His word, He keeps His word. Huh? The Christian view is that the return of Jesus is close. Close. And so they are living in Akhiru Zaman. The Jewish view is that the advent of the Messiah that they're waiting on is close. Close. So they believe that they are in Akhiru Zaman. Huh? In order for the Messiah to rule the world from Jerusalem, the state of Israel has to be restored. In order for a state of Israel to be restored, and for Jews to return to reclaim the Holy Land as their own, the Holy Land has to be liberated, because it's under Muslim ruler. Okay, now we can understand. Why is it that a pope in Rome, and the popes are always European? You notice that? Has there ever been a Malay pope? Huh? The popes are always European. Strange, huh? Now we understand why a pope in Rome launched the Crusades. The Crusades which were European wars, not Christian wars, European. They were masquerading as Christian, but they were essentially European wars to liberate the Holy Land. Why? I'll tell you why. So that the Jews can return to reclaim the Holy Land as their own, so that a state of Israel can be restored in the Holy Land, so that that Israel can become once again the ruling state in the world, and so that the Messiah can rule the world from Jerusalem. It's so simple. So they launched the Crusades. The Crusades never ended. No. Still going on now in Guantanamo, for example. Well, in 1917, something happened. That European world, which had launched the Crusades, finally succeeded in defeating the Ottoman Islamic Empire and taking Jerusalem, 1917. And then between 1917 and 1948, they brought back the Jews to the Holy Land to reclaim it as their own. This is Banu Israel. And in 1948, they restored a state of Israel in the Holy Land. The Christian world was watching. The Jewish world was watching. That these events indicate that we are in Akhiru Zaman. And then the state of Israel grows and grows and grows until it becomes a superpower. We are in Akhiru Zaman for the Christian and for the Jew. And so the Messiah must be around the corner. Around the corner meaning close. So both the Christian and the Jewish view coincide now, except that the Christians say that the Messiah is coming back, whereas the Jew says, no, that's not the Messiah, the true Messiah is coming. And when he comes, he's going to rule the world from Jerusalem. And he's going to validate our Jewish claim to truth. There are many Jews who are going to be listening to this lecture. Many Jews. They like to listen to me, you know. There are many Jews who are going to be listening to this lecture of mine. And so I want to explain with clarity and briefly. In order for the Messiah to rule the world from Jerusalem and to convince the Jews that he is indeed the Messiah, then there are some things that must occur in Akhirul Zaman, in addition to what has already occurred. We have mentioned in previous lectures two things. Tonight we'll mention a third. For example, we said that in the Torah someone did some rewriting. And if you want to study that subject of the rewriting of the Torah, you can look at my book entitled The Religion of Abraham and the State of Israel, a View from the Quran, which is outside. It's not big, it's small. Or a better book would be Richard Friedman's book, Who Wrote the Bible. When you come to listen to my lectures, you must bring your notebook and pen. I don't see your notebooks and pens. Who Wrote the Bible by Richard Friedman. Try to get that book and read it. He was an eminent American historian of the Bible. And his research in the Bible, his research on the Bible coincides with what Allah says in the Quran. When they rewrote the Bible, they put into the Bible, in the Torah, that the Holy Land extends from the river of Egypt, which is the Nile, to the river Euphrates, which is a lie. It's false. But it's there. So in order for the Messiah to rule the world from the Holy Land, Israel has to extend its territory and enlarge its territory to encompass the territory from the river Nile to the river Euphrates. So Israel has to wage big wars to do that. You can't go home and eat roti canai and go to sleep and expect that the state of Israel will expand. Got to wage big wars. But Israel does not want to wage those big wars and appear to the world as an aggressor. So it will be convenient if the Muslims can rise up, and topple Hosni Mubarak. Rise up and topple this fella in Tunisia. Rise up and topple the fella in Yemen and so on. So that the world will see Islam rising. And then elections in Egypt and an Islamic government comes to power in Egypt. So that Israel can say, Islam is now threatening Israel. And Islam is now menacing the world. So when Israel wages a big wars, it would appear as though Israel is merely defending herself and saving mankind from Islam. See? Those big wars are coming. It should not be more than a year or two from now. When you see those big wars, you know, here is concrete evidence of Akhirul Zaman. Secondly, Israel cannot rule the world, and the Messiah cannot say, I am the Messiah from Jerusalem, if you're still using this bogus and fraudulent and utterly haram paper currency. Every Jew knows that that is haram. Every Jew knows that real money is gold and silver coins. Every Jew knows that. The gold dinar and silver dirham. And the temple in Jerusalem used to mint its own coins. Every Jew knows that. Because they did not accept the Roman money because of the head on it. Graven image. So Israel has to bring back gold and silver coins as money. And therefore the Western world is going to bring back gold and silver coins as money. We are passing now the stage of paper currency, and we've already moved into the world of electronic money. And the paper money is going down. And then the next stage after that is back to gold and silver. And we the Muslims, what are we doing? I'll tell you what we're doing. We're drinking Teh Tarik. That's what we're doing. I could use harsher language than that, you know. Israel has to do one more thing. So when you see the gold and silver coins coming back as money amongst the enemies, you know it's Akhiru Zaman. One more thing and we stop for the azan. Israel has to rebuild the temple. So Masjid al-Aqsa has to go. And they've already prepared the way by using every electronic device that they have to portray the dome of the rock as Masjid al-Aqsa. They've already destroyed the foundations, and so don't be surprised when a very convenient earthquake occurs and the masjid is reduced to rubble, and then they rebuild the temple. When you see that happening, you know it's Akhiru Zaman. So there are many indicators by which we can tell the Jewish and Christian world is now absolutely convinced that the Messiah is coming. We had the Buddhist and the Hindu view of history as cyclic, moving in cycles. We then had the Christian and the Jewish view of a golden age, and then movement downwards, linear movement, until history ends with the return of the golden age. And all four are of the view that the end of history is close. Now let us turn to another religion. It is a religion, I believe. Modern, Western, secular civilization. Its greatest historian appears to be the German philosopher Friedrich Hegel, who spelled out the Western conception of history. That history moves in this way, that there is a thesis and it is opposed by an antithesis, and then these two are reconciled in a synthesis. So we're moving upwards constantly, like a pyramid. Well, we were in a pyramid recently in, was it? Sunway. Sunway Pyramid. This movement of thesis, antithesis being reconciled in synthesis would have us believe that history is moving constantly upwards, progressing, and that the latest is the best. When Western civilization emerged, therefore, it represented the synthesis. What is the Malay word for synthesis? You don't have a word in Malay? No. Huh? What is it? Synthesis. Oh, Malay, so synthesis is a Malay word. Western civilization represents the synthesis of all that came before. everything that came before, including Islamic civilization, have now been surpassed, superseded by Western civilization. This is the best. And all previous religions now belong to the museums of history. Huh? All previous religions are now obsolete. You know, like the computer you had 10 years ago? Obsolete. Huh? Moribund, obsolete. Belonging to museums of history. Their time in history have come and gone, never to come back. And modern Western civilization represents the best, the highest state of progress that mankind has ever achieved. You know, when a man can marry another man. When a man can marry another man, they're going to be hating me when they listen to this lecture. And when women can be dressed and yet be naked, that's progress. And when people can have sexual intercourse in public like donkeys, that's progress. I tell you, they're going to hate me. They say this is the best. But they say something more than that. Now this is dogmatic. This is not a part of Friedrich Hegel at all. I don't know where they got this from. They said nothing will come now. This is the last. This is the last. There's nothing to come to surpass modern Western civilization. What was his name? The Japanese fellow? Yeah. Fukuyama. Fukuyama. This is the best, and there's nothing to come to surpass modern Western civilization. Oh, but wait, this is not the whole story. Come on, Fukuyama, there's more to this. Why is Western civilization obsessed with the Holy Land? Come on, tell me. You're supposed to be secular, but you are obsessed with the Holy Land. Why did you launch the Crusades? No other Christians join in the Crusades. No, only the white. Only the white Christians. They're the only ones. That sounds mysterious. I want an answer, particularly from the Pope in Rome. Why is it that Britain, which is supposed to be a secular state, in October of 1917 issues this strange and mysterious declaration called the Balfour Declaration, that it is the intention of the British government to work for the establishment of a Jewish national home in the Holy Land. It sounds as though modern Western civilization is pursuing a religious agenda. It's time for us to say so. Put it on record. And why is it that Britain in 1948 acted like a thief in the dark, functioning as the midwife for the baby to be born? The state of Israel. The British are very particular about law and transfer of power. You know, midnight and the flag and all the drums and song. The transfer of power is part of the pageantry of Britain when they decolonize, and a constitution and so on. But for Israel, they didn't do that. There was no legal transfer of power for Israel to be born. No, Britain, you left like a thief in the dark. Why? Is it because this Israel must have credentials as Holy Israel? It seems as though modern Western civilization is pursuing a religious agenda. Why does Britain maintain such a strong, close relationship with Israel? Sending spies into the Muslim world, Lawrence of Arabia, all the others, to wreak havoc amongst Muslims for Israel's sake. And then when Pax Americana took over from Pax Britannica, do you have any tools of political analysis to explain to me why does the United States of America have this strange and mysterious obsession with Israel, protecting Israel, with countless vetoes in the Security Council of the United Nations? Why is there this massive transfer of wealth to Israel? Why is there this massive transfer of military technology to Israel? Why? It seems as though the United States has a religious agenda as well, that they want Israel to become the ruling state in the world. And those who control power in the United States know that the time has now come for the United States to bow so Israel can stand. And therefore the US dollar has to collapse, the American economy has to collapse. So it'll be very convenient for us now to make sure we put a black man as president. So he'll be the fall guy. I hope Barack Obama listens to this lecture. Is it that modern Western civilization is led by people who are themselves pursuing a religious agenda connected with Akhiru Zaman? Is it? Yes, it is. And now we come to the Islamic view of the end of history. Nabi Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam told us that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created a being and programmed that being to function as someone who would impersonate the true Messiah. And he called him Al-Masih Ad-Dajjal. Al-Masih Ad-Dajjal. And so Dajjal will one day appear as a human being. I believe that's not too far from now. Maybe another 20, 25 years, 30 years, Dajjal is going to appear as a human being. Yeah, in Jerusalem. In order for Dajjal to convince the Jews that he is the Messiah they're waiting on, okay, he has to liberate the Holy Land. He has to bring the Jews back to the Holy Land to reclaim it as their own. He has to restore a state of Israel in the Holy Land. Oh, but he's already done all of that. How did he do it? The Quran tells us that Allah created human beings from Banu Adam. Human beings. I have created creatures of mine so powerful that none but I can destroy them. Therefore, I want to suggest to you that Gog and Magog must have a unique genetic composition. The Ashkenazi Jews, the European Jews, have precisely that unique genetic composition, different from all the rest of mankind. They suffer from diseases no other human being suffer from. And this is medically proven. Gog and Magog are in the Quran. And with their power, which cannot be destroyed except by Allah, with their power they unleash upon the world fasad. Fasad is criminal conduct, not just sinful conduct, criminal conduct, which is so abhorrent that Allah has reserved the worst punishment of all for fasad among the hudud. For fasad you begin with banishment, but you know where you end? The worst one? You cut off the hand and the feet on opposites. This is the Quran. This is the Quran. You cut off the hand and feet on opposite sides and crucify them. Allah has commanded that in the Quran for fasad. And Gog and Magog, inna ya'juja wa ma'juja mufsiduna fil ard. Which surah? Suratul Kahfi. Suratul Kahf of the Quran. One of the last books I have written is an Islamic view of Gog and Magog in the modern world, and we have that book outside. And so Dajjal uses Gog and Magog to do this work, to wage the crusades, to liberate the Holy Land, to bring the Jews back to the Holy Land, to restore the state of Israel. He uses Gog and Magog. The Islamic view of the end of history, therefore, revolves around Dajjal and Gog and Magog. And we have recognized them, who they are. Allah speaks in the Quran about Jerusalem, that Jerusalem is central to the end of history. Yeah. But He does not name Jerusalem by name. You have to get all the data in the Quran to be able to identify the Qarya. وَحَرَامٌ عَلَى قَرْيَةٍ أَهْلَكْنَاهَا أَنَّهُمْ لَا يَرْجِعُونَ حَتَّى إِذَا فُتِحَتْ يَأْجُوجُ وَمَأْجُوجُ وَهُمْ مِنْ كُلِّ حَدَبٍ يَنْسِلُونَ. A people, a town has been destroyed, and Allah has expelled the people of the town. And He's put a ban on them that they can never return until Gog and Magog are released, Ya'juj and Ma'juj. And not only are they released, but they spread out in all directions, and therefore with their power, which you cannot break, they control the world. They control the world. So history ends with Dajjal as the mastermind in the world, and Gog and Magog doing the groundwork. The view of Islam, however, is that when Israel becomes the successor to the United States, Pax Judaica replaces Pax Americana, and I wrote this book 10 years ago, Jerusalem in the Quran, 10 years ago, in which we said a day like a year, Dajjal's Yawmun Kasana was Pax Britannica. It produced Pax Britannica. A day like a month, Yawmun Kashahr, gave us Pax Americana. And then finally a day like a week, Yawmun Kajum'ah, will give us Pax Judaica. That Israel is going to replace the United States as the next ruling state in the world. 15 years ago when we said this, they were laughing at us. They're not laughing anymore now. Now, Israel is about to launch her wars. But Israel cannot launch those wars until she has a justification, therefore the Arab uprisings. And Israel has to remove that threat from Pakistan. Pakistan, nuclear weapons and nuclear plants have to go, and Iran's nuclear plants have to go, because they pose a threat to Israel. And so when you see Pax Judaica replacing Pax Americana, we know we are in Akhiru Zaman. And very soon, Dajjal is going to appear in person, ruling the world from Jerusalem and declaring that I am the Messiah. However, this is not the end of history. The Jews will say this is the end of history. And history is ending with a spectacular validation of the Jewish claim to truth. 25 years from now. The Christians are going to wake up and rub their eyes, the ones who are deceived by Europe, and they say, but wait a minute, this fella there in Jerusalem who says he's the Messiah, boy, he is not the son of Mary. Huh? The Messiah who is to come back is the son of Mary. This fella is not the son of Mary. This is not Jesus. It seems as though we were taken for a ride. Are we telling them that now if they're listening to the lecture? You've been taken for a ride. This is not the Messiah. This is Dajjal, the false Messiah. And this is not the end of history. The Jews are celebrating, but this is not the end of history. History will now end when the true Messiah comes back. Nabi Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam said that he will come down from the sky with his hands resting on the wings of two angels. He's going to come down in a masjid in Damascus. And I had some problems with this hadith, I have to confess. I said, why Damascus? He went up in Jerusalem, so why is he coming back in Damascus? You know how I like to ask questions. So I lived with this problem for some time until I realized, oh, wait a minute. The first time he came, Allah raised a man, Yahya alayhi salam, John the Baptist. And it was Yahya alayhi salam, John the Baptist, who pointed and said, here he is. This is the man you've been waiting for. This is the Messiah. Positive identification. And so when he's to come back, he comes back again where John the Baptist is, because his head is buried in Damascus, in Masjid al-Umawi. So now I realize why he has to come back to Damascus or not to Jerusalem. When he comes back, he's going to kill Dajjal. And after he kills Dajjal, then Allah will send فَبَعَثَ اللَّهُ. Allah will send. It does not say Allah will release. No. It does not say that Allah will release. No. It says that Allah will send Gog and Magog. And then comes the big conflict between Gog and Magog. وَتَرَكْنَا بَعْضَهُمْ يَوْمَئِذٍ يَمُوجُ فِي بَعْضٍ, which includes Star Wars. We've killed those who are on earth, now let us kill those who are in the heavens above. And they'll shoot their arrows up in the sky, and Allah will cause the arrows to come back down. These arrows are of course missiles with blood on them. Gog and Magog mutually annihilate each other. And then the power of modern Western civilization is broken. And Israel is now defenseless. I hope Israel is listening. Israel is now defenseless. It is then that the Muslim army will come out of Khorasan and liberate every territory in a straight line until it reaches Jerusalem. There is no war to fight because the Jews are now on the run. At this time they're stamping their feet as oppressors and oppressing innocent people unjustly, barbaric oppression. But at that time they go be on the run, because Nabi Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam says history will end this way. Of course, Harun Yahya is lying. I don't know why Harun Yahya has to lie. Why does Harun Yahya have to lie? It's not a good thing to lie. Imran Hosein doesn't use this kind of language. No. There must be a very valid reason for him to speak like this publicly and use this violent language. Okay? To tell us that when Nabi Isa alayhi salam returns, the Quran says that the Jews and the Christians will believe in him. La yu'minanna bihi qabla mawti. And the Muslims already believe in him. So history is going to end according to Yahya, Harun Yahya. History is going to end with Christians and Muslims and Jews living together as a family. And since that is the way history is going to end, why don't you live like that now? In other words, why don't you embrace Israel? Looks to me as though the Israeli Mossad scripted that. It looks to me like that. I hope they're listening. That's false, Harun Yahya. Let us tell you the truth, Harun Yahya. Whoever you are, Harun Yahya, hiding behind a pen name. Islamic scholarship doesn't hide behind any pen names. In Islam, when you publish something, you give your name, so you can be held accountable for what you say or what you write. We don't hide behind pen names, not in Islam. When Pharaoh was drowning, he suddenly realized that he was not God, for he's dying. And then he declared his faith in the God of Banu Israel. But Allah responded and said, Alan, وَقَدْ عَصَيْتَ قَبْلُ. Now, Pharaoh, and before this you were in obstinate rejection, وَكُنْتَ مِنَ الْمُفْسِدِينَ, and you were committing fasad, you were oppressing the people. فَالْيَوْمَ نُنَجِّيكَ بِبَدَنِكَ. This day we have decided to preserve your physical body. لِتَكُونَ لِمَنْ خَلْفَكَ آيَةً. That your physical body, when it is rediscovered, would function as a sign for a people to come after you. Would function as a sign for a people to come after you. وَإِنَّ كَثِيرًا مِنَ النَّاسِ عَنْ آيَاتِنَا لَغَافِلُونَ. But most people are too busy, so much traffic in KL, too busy to ponder and reflect over the signs of Allah. The body of Pharaoh was discovered. I think it was 1897, somewhere around there, but in the same year that the Zionist movement was established. The link is there. Who are the people to come after you, and what is the warning for them? What is the sign? The sign is this: that there are a people to come after you who will live the way you lived, and who will die the way you died. Meaning, at the last moment, when Nabi Isa alayhi salam arrives, now the veils are removed from their eyes, and they cannot anymore reject him as the Messiah. Now they are forced to accept him. But acceptance and belief at this time for Pharaoh did no good to him, into the hellfire. And acceptance when Nabi Isa alayhi salam comes back will do no good to them, into the hellfire. So this is a lie from Harun Yahya, that we'll all come together, Christians, Muslims and Jews, as a fraternity. Oh yes, there are Christians who denounce Israel, and there are Jews who denounce Israel and its oppression. Those Christians and those Jews are our friends and allies. We have no conflict with them. They are not oppressors. But these are oppressors. And Nabi Muhammad ﷺ told us how it will end. Not a Christian, Muslim, Jewish fraternity according to Harun Yahya. No. Someone should direct Harun Yahya to the hadith, which is in Sahih Bukhari. Somehow or the other, he hasn't read the hadith. The Prophet said, لَتُقَاتِلُنَّ الْيَهُودِ. This hadith is in Bukhari, it is in Muslim. You will most certainly fight the Jews. This is how history will end. وَلَتَقْتُلُنَّهُمْ. And you'll most certainly defeat them. حَتَّى يَقُولُ الْحَجَرُ. At that time even the stones will speak. Ya Muslim, هَذَا يَهُودِيٌّ وَرَائِي فَتَعَالَ فَقْتُلْ. There's a Jew hiding behind me, so come and kill him. Which Jew? Don't make the mistake, please, of thinking it's all Jews. That's Disneyland thinking. No, only those Jews who are oppressors. And that is what Israel is today, an oppressor. And so history will end quite differently from Harun Yahya's end of history. He had to write I don't know how many thousand books. And he had to produce I don't know how many thousand documentaries in every single Islamic cable channel in the world in order to be able to infiltrate us with this falsehood. And we only needed 5 minutes. Only needed 5 minutes to expose this utter lie. And so history ends with the destruction of the state of Israel, the impostor, with the destruction of Dajjal and of Gog and Magog, the liberation of the Holy Land. And now the truth is triumphant. And the truth which came from Nabi Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam, which came in the Quran, that truth is validated. That truth is validated. And therefore, Akhir Zaman ends with truth triumphant in Jerusalem. But the Christians were saying the same thing. And the Jews were saying the same thing. And the Muslims are saying the same thing. Except that it's not the same thing. The truth which came in the Quran is the uncorrupted truth. And you have corrupted the message which came in previous revelations. And so it is to the Quran that mankind must turn. Only the Quran can explain the end of history. We pray that our gathering here tonight will understand that we have a duty to the Quran, that we must not betray the Quran. Nabi Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam complained, and the complaint is in the Quran. Do you know that? And he complained to Allah, and he complained about you and I. It is in Surah Al-Furqan. وَقَالَ الرَّسُولُ يَا رَبِّ إِنَّ قَوْمِ اتَّخَذُوا هَذَا الْقُرْآنَ مَهْجُورًا. My people have forsaken this Quran. We will be falling in that category if we do not now return to the Quran and get the Quran to explain to us the world in which we are living today. You can begin that process by reciting the Quran constantly, cover to cover. And when you finish, you start again. And when you finish, you start again. Because you know what happens when you recite the Quran constantly? Do you know how much filth gets into the mind? It's constantly being corrupted, filth after filth, coming from television, coming from KLCC, coming from all. And you need to wash it. You need to have the ghusl of the mind. How can you get the ghusl of the mind and the heart? Answer, you must recite the Quran. And as you're reciting the Quran, the recitation of the Quran will purify you and give you the capacity to think clearly. And then when you study the Quran, you'll be able to see what otherwise cannot be seen. رَبَّنَا تَقَبَّلْ مِنَّا إِنَّكَ أَنْتَ السَّمِيعُ الْعَلِيمُ وَتُبْ عَلَيْنَا يَا مَوْلَانَا إِنَّكَ أَنْتَ التَّوَّابُ الرَّحِيمُ بِرَحْمَتِكَ يَا أَرْحَمَ الرَّاحِمِينَ Ameen. 1 hour and 7 minutes. Do we anticipate that Israel will return to a political monarchy away from the political democracy that they now have? Because Nabi Dawood and Nabi Sulaiman were kings. The answer is correct, yes. Israel will return to a monarchy so that Dajjal could be claimed to be the king of Israel. Yeah. Next question. There is a hadith al-Qudsi that answers you. When there is oppression, then Allah has zero tolerance for oppression. And Islam has given us the proper manner to respond to oppression. There is oppression all over the world today. For example, economic oppression. When the rich are permanently rich and the poor are imprisoned in permanent poverty, that is oppression. Around the world today, that oppression exists. When that oppression exists, then the poor are exploited. An Indonesian maid in Singapore will get $300 a month as a wage. Will any Singaporean woman work for that wage? Come on, Singaporeans, if you're here tonight, answer me. No, the answer is no. In Malaysia, she gets about 600. Would any Malaysian woman do that work for that wage? Come on, Malaysians, answer me. The answer is no. You are then oppressors. This is slave labor. And Allah has zero tolerance. And Allah destroys oppressors, destroys them. And history is going to end with the destruction of every town and every city. Did you know that? In Suratul Isra of the Quran, Allah says, but you'll only understand this verse when you study Islamic eschatology, Akhiru Zaman. وَإِن مِّن قَرْيَةٍ إِلَّا نَحْنُ مُهْلِكُوهَا قَبْلَ يَوْمِ الْقِيَامَةِ أَوْ مُعَذِّبُوهَا عَذَابًا كَبِيرًا شَدِيدًا وَإِن مِّن قَرْيَةٍ إِلَّا نَحْنُ مُهْلِكُوهَا قَبْلَ يَوْمِ الْقِيَامَةِ أَوْ مُعَذِّبُوهَا عَذَابًا شَدِيدًا كَانَ ذَلِكَ فِي الْكِتَابِ مَسْطُورًا. And not a single town and city will escape, says the Quran. All will be destroyed. All will be destroyed. Oppression. And those that escape destruction, Allah will punish them with terrible punishment. Well, what about you if you are in the city and there is oppression? But you are in the masjid in Jama'ah 5 times a day. And you constantly reciting the Quran, mashallah, mashallah. And you giving in charity, mashallah. But you're not making an effort to respond to oppression. What is the response? The Prophet said, Man ra'a munkaran falyughayyirhu biyadi. You must first attempt with your hand to change it. Wa illam yastati fa lisani. If you cannot change it with your hand, you must speak out against it. Let it be recorded. And if you cannot, then you must condemn it in your heart. But that is the weakest form of faith. Now we come to the Hadith al-Qudsi. This, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala instructs Jibreel alayhi salam to destroy a town. Oppression could be one of the reasons for destruction. And Jibreel alayhi salam then points out to Allah that in that town there is your servant who is constantly in ibadah. What shall we do with him? Allah said, destroy him and destroy the town. The Hadith al-Qudsi indicating that if you are living in a world of oppression all around you, you cannot change it with your hand, you cannot change it with your tongue. The true Muslim would get out because he knows that Allah's destruction is coming. The true Muslim will follow Surah Al-Kahfi. The young men stood up and denounced the shirk, and then they were targeted, and the young men left, they withdrew, they disconnected, and they went to the cave. And Allah recognized these are the true Muslims, and Allah protected them, as Allah will protect the true Muslims tomorrow. Knocking at the door of 70 years of age, a few months from now, if I live. But I really don't know what's an Islamic State, never heard about it. I don't know. I never saw this term in the Quran. I never saw this term in the Hadith. I don't find this term in our Kitab of Siyar. Islamic State? Where did this term come from? It dropped out of the sky? I know about Khilafah. I know about Khilafah. But you will have to ask somebody else who's done his PhD in Islamic State to answer you on Islamic State. Khilafah is coming back. كيف أنتم إذا نزل عليكم مريم وإمامكم منكم, said Nabi Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam, Sahih Bukhari, the Imam being Imam al-Mahdi. The Khilafah state recognizes Allah as Al-Malik, the sovereign. The modern secular state all around the world today says Allah is not Al-Malik. The state is Al-Malik. Sovereignty is in the state. That is shirk. That is shirk. If you don't believe me, wait until you get in your grave. Yes. The Khilafah state recognizes Allah as Al-Akbar. The modern secular state says no. The state has supreme authority. The Security Council of the United Nations has supreme authority, not Allah. That is shirk. The Khilafah state says Allah is Al-Hakam, the supreme lawgiver. His law is the supreme law. The modern secular state, which came from those fellows in Europe, you know who, it says that no, Allah is not Al-Hakam. The supreme law is the law of the state. That is shirk. You don't believe me? Well, wait until you reach your grave. Tasawwuf did not exist. The name did not exist. There was another name that came down from Allah. And I like that name, the one that is in the Quran and in the Sunnah. What is it? Al-Ihsan. The angel asked, what is Al-Ihsan? And the Nabi replied and he said, أَن تَعْبُدَ اللَّهَ كَأَنَّكَ تَرَاهُ فَإِن لَمْ تَكُنْ تَرَاهُ فَإِنَّهُ يَرَاكَ. This is Al-Ihsan. There was no need to invent a new word. Tasawwuf. No need for that. Because you invented a new word, you give me plenty headaches. I wish you'd never done it. Al-Ihsan is to worship Allah as though you're seeing Him with your internal eye, because these eyes can't see Allah. So al-ihsan is the spirituality, Islamic spirituality, to be able to see with the internal eye that worships Allah. If you cannot see with that internal eye, you know what Allah says about you? The language is harsh in the Quran. He said they have eyes but they don't see. They have ears but they don't hear. They have hearts but they don't understand. They are just like cattle. What do you mean? I did my PhD from MIT and you say I'm cattle? Yes. If you are internally blind, this is tasawwuf. This is tasawwuf. But the people who call themselves Sufis today, I find that they are just as blind as all the rest. Because the bogus and the fraudulent and the haram paper currency is there, and they can't see that it is bogus and fraudulent and haram. Secondly, why the boxing gloves? Why? Can't you settle your differences in such a way that you maintain the fraternity of Islam? A simple thing to do, and I'm glad I got the chance to say it now. If Nabi Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam returns today and notices how we perform salat. No. Before that, the wudu. The wudu. He saw a man performing wudu. And he asked him, what is the explanation, the justification for this israf? Man was using too much water. So the man said, O Messenger of Allah, I thought that there was no israf in wudu. Yes, said the Prophet, even if you have a running stream of water, even if you have a running stream of water, no israf. How much water? This hat is more than a mud of water. And the amount of water used in wudu is a mud. The first act of wudu is to lift the container and wash the left hand. Sorry, lift the container with the left hand and wash the right hand. That's the first act of wudu. And then you dip with the right hand, and this is a cup. And this is the amount of water to use in every act of wudu. And if there's any water left in the container, he would drink it, or the companions will ask for it and rub it. Today, we turn open the tap, full blast. You're washing your hands and the water is falling. You're making masa on your head and the water is falling. And if we collect all of that water, it might be 30, 40, 50 times what that man was doing. So if Nabi Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam comes today, you get a very big surprise if he goes to make wudu. And then comes the salat. Everybody knows that when you make the salams, salat has ended. And when the salat has ended, it is private time, not public time anymore. Intensely private time. Because I don't know whether Allah accepted my salat. Sometimes I stand up and perform salat, and when I'm finished, He throws it back in my face. He throws the salat back in my face. So once the Imam says salams, I want to ask for istighfar. And I don't want you interrupting me. This is my right to be constantly asking for istighfar, begging Allah to accept my salat. And you going on with your tasbihat loudly. I want to recite Subhanallah, Alhamdulillah, Allahu Akbar myself, with my heart, privately. But you want me to do it publicly. And I sit down and I am angry. But I can't say anything. Because you've been doing it for 1,000 years now. And you will never change. So all that I can do is to build my own masjid. And in my masjid, after the salams, it will be quiet. Quiet. And everybody will be able to make istighfar, seeking forgiveness with tears in the heart, tears in the eyes, and begging Allah to accept the salat I've just performed. And then make tazkirat privately. These are things that we should be seeking to do in the masjid. Is that answer your question? Use the word Taliban. Those who use the word Taliban have to answer that question. I always use the Islamic resistance, the armed Islamic resistance. And I accept as valid the struggle of all my brothers who are struggling and giving their lives while I'm here in KL eating durian. I only ate it once so far. They are giving their lives out there. They are fighting. Why should I not accept the legitimacy of their armed struggle? And support them in every single way that I can. So I make no distinction between my brothers who are engaged in the armed struggle for liberation from oppression in Afghanistan. I want to see no sectarian debates. No. The way forward is to accept them all as our brothers who are waging a legitimate struggle against injustice and against oppression. And then we are obliged to support that jihad. It is a jihad. If you cannot go and join the jihad, then you can support the jihad materially. You can support the jihad in many different ways, but you do not oppose it. The Prophet spoke, alayhi salatu wasalam, about riba. The economists somehow or the other don't like to use the word riba. He said whether riba is big or small, the end is still the same. Destitution, poverty and destitution. They call it depression. The masses are reduced to biting poverty. That is already here. So if the rich people on the gravy train have some up and down, the rich people on the gravy train have some ups and downs, it does not affect the basic situation where most of mankind are now living in destitution, in permanent poverty. That is the analysis that we must give to the world. Okay? Yes, the US dollar is going to collapse. In fact, I believe it's going to be demonetized, meaning it's not going to be accepted as legal tender for buying and selling. Because Uncle Sam knows, if you're in ICU long enough, you're going to die. Okay? So the US dollar actually is already dead. But they're keeping it alive with this modern machine. When they demonetize the US dollar, they're going to have something to, they have to have something to replace it. I did not realize this when I said 15 years ago that all the paper money will collapse and will all be replaced with electronic money. I said that 15 years ago. Now I realize that electronic money has already taken over from paper money. The major financial transactions in the world are all electronic now, digital. And the paper money is used only for micro transactions, micro. It will be a little bit cumbersome to have electronic money used for buying Tetarik, Roti Canai, newspaper. So they will need a substitute for the paper currency. when they demonetize the US dollar. What is that substitute going to be? I don't know. If you go to Makkah and Medina today, you're going to meet Dajjal. Oh yes. Dajjal is there, big sign, KFC. Dajjal is there, big sign, McDonald's, hamburgers. Dajjal is very firmly there in Makkah and Medina now. Oh yes. What the hadith actually is speaking of is when Dajjal emerges in our world of space and time. And he's not as yet emerged in our world of space and time. When Dajjal is released, he will live on earth for 40 days. This is explained in Jerusalem in the Quran, but even better in chapter 2 of my book entitled Suratul Kahfi and the Modern Age. Chapter 2 is entitled The Quran and Time, and that chapter explains this hadith. That he will live on earth for 40 days. A day like a year, a day like a month, a day like a week, and all his days, meaning all the rest of his days, like your days. My understanding is that a day like a year has already ended. My understanding is that a day like a month is ending now. My understanding is that a day like a week is now commencing. Unfortunately, I'm the only scholar who has this view. So you don't have to accept my view at all. No. You should only accept my view when you are convinced that I'm correct. Otherwise, I'll be very disappointed in you. Yeah. When Dajjal's day like a week has ended, then he will appear in human form as a Jew, born of Jewish parents. And the Prophet described him as a young man who would be powerfully built and who would have curly hair. It is that stage of his life where Israel will not be able to penetrate Makkah and Medina. Dajjal will come on his donkey. The donkey will travel as fast as the clouds. The donkey will have his ears stretched out wide. In other words, Israel is going to attack with fighter aircraft. But the angels are going to block. And they will not be able to penetrate Makkah and Medina. The hadith relates to that period of time. Dajjal will be followed by 70,000 Jews from Isfahan wearing their Persian shawls, says the hadith. In other words, there's going to be a very close connection between Iran and Dajjal. And support for Dajjal coming from Iran. Which is why we are almost certain that Israel will have to attack Iran. Yes. Not only for destroying the Iranian nuclear plants and so on, but overthrowing this government, which is most certainly supporting the Palestinian cause and opposing Israel. When this government, this regime in Iran is overthrown, as the regime of Mullah Omar in Afghanistan was overthrown, then you have a Karzai in Afghanistan, Karzai. So you'll have a Karzai in Iran tomorrow, not this government. That would be a militantly Shia government. This is not. From the time Iran is attacked and the government is toppled, they probably already have someone groomed to declare himself to be Imam al-Mahdi. I think the Mossad already chose a man already. And he's going to declare himself the Mahdi. It might even be Harun Yahya, the Mahdi. So we have to be careful. We have to be careful that there are Shia in the world whose hearts beat with our hearts, who despise Israel, who despise the oppression in the Holy Land. And these Shia, like Christians, like Jews, are our friends and brothers, because we fight a common cause against a common enemy. But then there are other Shia who are not like that. And those are the ones that the Anglo-American Israeli alliance want to put in power in Iran. And we have to be careful when they bring out their false Imam al-Mahdi.
Okay, last question.
This is probably going to be the last time that I engage in this extended travel. I left my home 2 months ago. I have slept in about 24 beds already in 2 months. I still have about a year and a half of travel left ahead of me, continuously traveling. This is not easy at all. I hope I can complete it. But when I complete it and go back home, I say, oh Allah, let others now do it, please. I don't want to travel again. What advice do I have for you? Do not betray the Quran. No, do not betray the Quran. Only the Quran can explain the world today. And in the Quran it is Islamic eschatology, the subject of Akhiru Zaman. Only the Quran can explain Akhiru Zaman. I have written several books, read them. Jerusalem in the Quran is the textbook on Islamic eschatology. Gog and Magog, an Islamic view of Gog and Magog in the modern world, has just been written. It is here. Suratul Kahf in the modern age. And I'm now writing the book on Dajjal. Read all the gold dinar and silver dirham, Islam and the future of money. It's only 55 pages. Because Dr. Suleiman Mahbub, who is the Director General of the Prime Minister's Department of Economic Planning, he was the chairman when I gave this lecture in Damansara Heights 4 years ago. And when I was finished with the lecture, he asked me to write out this lecture.